This is the MixCoach Podcast, episode 107. On this episode, we'll be talking to you about Kevin's NAMM 2017 experience. Diving right in, the NAMM show 2017, was it as overwhelmingly large as it has been in the past?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you know, the first time you go, it's just so huge. You remember, we went together for the first time.
Right.
And it was really overwhelming. I mean, it was like we took the whole first day we were there just like in shock and awe, because it's like, seems like it's about 4 times bigger than the one in Nashville. But yeah, I really didn't have an agenda. And as a matter of fact, I wish that I could have connected more with people, and maybe the next time I go, I can have an itinerary. But sometimes, you know, that's just not, it just doesn't work. You find yourself wandering around and stumbling into cool stuff, which is a lot of what I did.
Yeah, and that's kind of, sometimes a lot of times where the cool things happen. Like whenever you just kind of stumble upon a cool demo or a really like interesting plugin or hardware, that sort of thing. It's just a lot of times it's the things that you didn't anticipate seeing that are the most fun. Yeah.
Well, one of the first things we did, you know, I didn't get to go as long and for as many days as I wanted to. So I tried to cover a lot in one day. And as you know, walking and covering that much ground in one day and being that excited, it's like going into the world's largest music store. You know, being Definitely. That excited, it kind of wears you out. So you end up, and then parking, and it was raining pretty bad when we were there. But yeah, the first thing,
rain in California, who would have known, man?
Yeah, I know we've gotten a lot of rain here. They say that you know, maybe the drought's over. I don't know.
That's cool,
man. It hasn't rained here solid in 6 years, they say. And then I come. I guess I brought it from Nashville. Yeah, but the first thing we did, you know, I rounded the corner, and I thought, that's Chris Lord-Alge, and and sure enough, he was in the booth for Mix with the Masters, and I think he was promoting his thing with Mix with the Masters. I don't know exactly when it is, but I tell you, I would. That's kind of a dream getaway for me, is to go to one of the Mix with the Masters things. But he was sitting in front of a big SSL console, and he was kind of doing a mix demo, and I was sitting there taking notes ferociously, but I was standing pretty much right beside him. I mean, I could have. I was leaning on the SSL, and he was just right there. I've never been that close. Cool, I mean, I tell you, I germed out a little bit. I was like seeing a rock star for the first time, because, you know, Chris Lord-Alge is just he's been a big influence in my career. And even before information, or he made information so readily available about what he did, I was trying to read every article and study what he did. To be standing right there, it was pretty cool. But he was really kind of pitching the Mix for the Masters thing. But he covered a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of stuff, you know, I've kind of adopted as my workflow too. One of the big things he talked about was, making sure a session was ready before you mixed it. He said you never prep a session and try to mix it at the same time, which is something we teach on MixCoach Member a lot. Is, you know, don't you only have so much mental bandwidth. Don't waste it crunching numbers when you should be painting pictures, you know. Right. And he was very stickler on that, prepping stuff. Of course, I doubt he prepped anything that much himself, but yeah, he did a blindfolded mixing thing. He took someone's scarf and blindfolded him, which, you know, I don't know how. It felt a little awkward at times, but basically his point was, you know, put things in the same order all the time so you don't have to think about it, which, as you know, I mean, even when you were interning, it's like, hey, if you don't have to think about where you put your kick drum this time, then you're ahead of the game a little bit. So that's what he was teaching, you know, just like knowing where everything is.
Right. Well, we always talk about even to the point of having templates and having things that you import in. And so it's like, yeah, you know kind of what some settings and you're, especially like the setup side of things, so like with buses and master buses and things like that, you know how everything's going to be routed, or how you like to route things. So why recreate that from scratch every time? And so, exactly. Starting from somewhere that's a good spot to start from, that hey, I'm going to get there. Starting from there, just by importing a template or anything like that, like that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things he did was he was mixing a song that he mixed a few years ago, and he was talking about how the song, when it came in, it was well over 100 tracks, and that when he was coming up, which about the same time I was coming up too, I guess, that you only had two 24-track machines that you could strap together, and that was a pretty big feat. I mean, I never had that. So he says that 44 is really the magic number for him. He tries to get all of his tracks down to 44 tracks, which I'm sure is not that necessary now because we have endless tracks. But if you think about the way he comes about it, I mean, you don't want to waste your mental bandwidth on, which pass of first violins do I want to pull up. He gets his assistants, I'm sure, to bounce multiple tracks. Like if you have two sets of background vocals that are singing at different times, then bounce those down to two stereo tracks. And I don't know for sure if he affects those tracks. It sounded like they probably, if they weren't, I'm sure they weren't printed on the track with the original, the bounce. But there's definitely, I don't know if he bounced the effects too. But anyway, he was saying that 44 tracks was the magic number for him because you start out with 48 tracks if you have two 24-track machines together, and then you have to have a time code track on each one of those machines, which brings it down to 46, and then you don't want to record anything beside the time code track, which I don't know if you remember those days or not, but you don't want to record anything by this empty track because, you get this, it sounds like a Martian, like on the Jetsons coming by without the Doppler effect. But so he says 44 tracks is the magic number for him, and that's plenty of tracks. So one of the things I took home was like, when someone sends me a lot of strings to mix, I usually do that too, especially these days with the budgets being lower. A lot of times, instead of having a huge section, you'll have a smaller section, and then you'll do multiple passes of them. And, sometimes I feel a little guilty, a little dirty, I guess, like I'm not delivering full everything I could if I bounce the strings down. But you know what? I bounce all the first violins down to one track. Because we're recording a huge orchestra, you wouldn't have very many more tracks than one first violin section. So,
and you think about the imaging on something like that. You have a big ensemble, a big group of people playing something. It's not like whenever you're sitting in an audience that you're going to be able to put your ear right next to the first violin and then go over to the next first violin and the next first, or the second and third violins, like those. You can't really go down the line there. So creating them, creating a subgroup, a submix of like, hey, here's this group of strings over here, and that's it makes it easier mentally. It makes it easier for the listener to kind of sit back and say, okay, this is the mix,
Yeah. Well, so I was encouraged by that because I was thinking, here's one of the best mixers in the world, and he thinks nothing of bouncing multiple passes together and doesn't even think about it. And he was talking about the value and the creativity of making decisions quickly. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think we all could build into our workflow is like, that overthinking things kind of get cost in creativity. And he was talking about, he doesn't think, he doesn't give it a second thought to bounce two tracks together because you can always go back and rebounce those. If it's like, oh yeah, that part's not working or whatever, you can always go back. While you take a break, you can get an assistant or an intern or just do it on a different day. Go back and rebounce that if you need to. So he was talking about the value of making decisions quickly. And also he talked about, don't fear the song. And I think that's one of the things he was trying to say when he did the blindfolding thing. He was talking about, he's gotten to mix some stuff lately or, in the last several years that, styles that he maybe doesn't mix a lot, but he wasn't afraid of them. And I don't know if you've ever, he seems like a pretty bold mixer. He's pretty opinionated and he's pretty sure of his ability, and he should be. Sure. He's a great mixer. Absolutely. But he was just talking about, going into things. I know a lot of times, like this has happened, maybe this will help some people who are listening to this. A lot of times when we finally get that opportunity to mix for someone that we've been wanting to mix for, or mix a certain style of music that we've been wanting to mix for, a lot of people, they'll almost get the deer in the headlights sort of thing about it and go, oh my gosh, I need to change what I'm doing because what I've been doing up till now is not good enough for where I'm going, which, that's the whole thing. That's the whole reason we build templates and presets and things like that we preach on MixCoach Member. You're preparing for these opportunities. And when you get these opportunities, don't be afraid and say, oh, what I've been doing, or this piece of gear is not good enough for where I'm going. That really is kind of a toxic way of thinking, because somebody can listen to your mix and go, wow, that was pretty good. I think I'm going to get this guy to do some mixing for me in the future. And then if you go and change everything that you did to get that gig, then you're really kind of, you're shooting yourself in the foot, So that's what I got out of that, is just don't be afraid of the mix. I mean, just kind of go for it. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of those things that specifically whenever you've been, especially like the guys on MixCoach and that sort of thing, whenever they've built up their workflow and they've been mixing every single month with the sessions and getting great feedback on them, and then whenever they have a chance to kind of go after it, using what they know, using the knowledge they know is important, and just trusting it. Like, that's not necessarily the time to say, oh, well, now I have the thing that I've been wanting to get. Let me throw my entire workflow out and try this new thing that I've been wanting. That's the time to really like double down on your process and say, okay, I'm just going to trust my own process and trust the workflow that I've built up and that has been so successful over the past months, years, or whatever it's been. Yeah,
it's more of an opportunity to refine your workflow instead of redefine it. I mean,
exactly.
Because, I think it's a work in progress. I mean, if you save templates and presets and stuff like that, you have a place to start back again. So you're always building and making better the process instead of, I always feel sorry for somebody who feels like they need to start from scratch on everyone. And I know that there are occasions where you would want to do that. Maybe you want to mix things up a little bit, or maybe make things feel fresh again. And maybe we can talk about that in another podcast later on. But one last thing that he said that was kind of cool, because it's something that I'm a big believer in too, and it's the reason that I'm still mixing currently with a Control 24 instead of a smaller surface. He was just talking about. He said, he said, if you were a guitar player, would you play the guitar with one finger? And everybody's going, no, you can't play with one finger. And he said, then why would you try to mix a song with a mouse? And of course, that's his opinion on that. But I tend to agree that having, how it is when you have a guitar in front of you, and the difference between playing a virtual guitar like with a mouse or an iPad or an iPhone or like that, it's just not quite the same as sitting down at a guitar. And he was talking about, he believes that everybody should be mixing at a control surface. And I know that it's just not as fun or exciting for me when I mix with a mouse. I mean, I could do it, I think, and I think a lot of people have gotten used to it. But anyway, he's sitting there in front of an SSL, so who wouldn't love mixing on that? But I do kind of agree that if you don't have a control surface,
I also think a lot of that comes into like how did you first come to audio, and how did this work out? Because I think just the same as if a instrument has less strings, it doesn't make it less of an instrument. It doesn't make it less complicated to play or less skillful of an instrument. An incredible bass player, a lot of basses only have 4 strings. Mm-hmm. And then, you think about it that along those terms, and it's just like, it depends on what your style is and that sort of thing. And I would never say to someone, oh, you don't have access to a control surface, then you can't mix, or you can't mix as well as somebody who has access to a control surface. I've done both over the years, and I've always gravitated back towards not having a control surface, just because that's how I originally learned. I originally learned on like Pro Tools 2 or 3 or something, where the tracks were severely limited, and that sort of thing. And so, being from both worlds, I see the pros and cons of both, and it's just it just depends on what your personal taste is.
Yeah, well, there's great mixers out there like. I don't know about Diplo, but you can remind me, who's the guy that did the Justin Bieber really kind of revamped his.
Yeah, that would be it was Diplo, and then and Skrillex did some of that stuff.
Yeah, Skrillex. I don't think Skrillex has a control surface, but his mixes are incredible. Same thing with BC. Anyway, he's a guy that did NSYNC back in the day. He was kind of a remixer. I don't think he has a control surface. I mean, so I'm not saying, and I don't think he's saying that you can't do it without a control surface. I just think sometimes, and I think we probably do need to do a podcast on keeping things fresh. I think maybe it would be something you could interject when you do want a little spark of creativity and continuing your building your workflow. So maybe we need to talk about that on another podcast for sure.
Absolutely, that sounds great. I would love that idea.
Okay.
So what else? Was there anything else of note that you saw while you were at the old NAMM show 2017? Anything that you ran into while you were there, just in general passing?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I kind of geeked out a little bit because I was with my buddy Eddie, and I said, "That's Thomas Barefoot," and it was I'm a big fan of Barefoot monitors, as a lot of people are these days because they're great monitors, but. Anyway, I got my picture made with Thomas Barefoot.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, it's like
what he's done with monitoring is pretty cool. Of course, I think they just came out with a new, more affordable monitoring solution. So I don't know maybe that'll be in the show notes. The link
awesome.
to those monitors. But yeah, I got my picture made with him. I ran into Robert Randolph he was demoing some pedals and stuff, and it was like
that's super cool.
And then I heard this guy named Bobby Vega, who was a bass player. He was wearing it out. I mean, playing with the pick and thumping and all that kind of stuff. And it reignited the musician in me. I mean, it got me really excited about, mixing is kind of a means to an end. We have to have music and musicians and a musical sense, something that we remember that inspired us to want to start mixing in the first place. And that was one of the things I brought home from the NAMM show this time was like, wow, I really enjoy being a musician who mixes. It's just, it made me want to go home and practice playing too, and bringing up my musical chops a little bit. But yeah, Robert Randolph was wearing out a lap steel.
That's amazing, man.
And then Bobby Vega was killing it too. But yeah,
awesome.
that was pretty cool.
That's super cool, dude. I love the NAMM show because it not only has gear and has the stuff that appeals to the more technical side, but it's got, like you said, it's got the music as well. You can't go anywhere without hearing an amazing guitar player, an amazing steel player, an amazing bass player, an amazing drummer. I mean, even over into like the trumpets and like those types of sections, the brass sections and stuff. Like you just walk through and it's a place that is really just lots of music crammed into a few football fields worth of real estate, and it's just a cool experience, man.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome, dude. I love it. And so yeah, that's the NAMM show 2017 experience. Thank you for going and thank you for sitting down to report back and share some of the stuff that you heard and that inspired you and everything there.
Yes, sir. It was fun. Maybe next year you can come.
That would be amazing. I always love the NAMM show. This podcast is brought to you by MixCoach Member. If you really want to move the needle on your mixing, the best way to get better is to mix consistently, ask questions, and get feedback. That's why every month at MixCoach Member, we give members a session download, a video tutorial covering that session, a live Q&A webinar with Kevin and Jon, and the chance for mixed feedback from coaches. Head over to mixcoach.com/member.